Uh, check coming to you, link is coming to you from JWP Election. And if it, you don't put the inbox around because I can see my summary. Yeah, JWP Election. Okay. All right, hope it works. Thank you.
If not, we are live.
Okay. That's been over live now.
Yep.
Call it right back.
We're live.
Get started.
That's what works. I want to just sort of start off. You'll hear from me for the last time. I'm going to turn over the lat here. We've got an amazing program. We've got 3 amazing speakers. Who each one brings something special to this podium and about the men that they're going to talk about. So what I didn't do out of the park is I didn't really concentrate and focus on the 3 important organizations that really made tonight. And that is Holiday River Expedition. Our local travel bureau. On this one, but I tell you what, it was worth every single penny. Watch it all of you enjoy yourselves.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm going to have a few announcements just in between each presentation. But first I wanted to start out with just naming our board members and naming our committee members and just having them stand up. So you can see everybody who's involved in the committee that made this happen. So first, Janet, who has been talking and she's walking towards the back. Everybody can stand up, and if you want to do a round of applause, and that'd be awesome. So we've got Martha Ham, and we've got Chloe Evans, and stay standing, if you would please. Brian Savino, Bob Quist, Levi Jamison, Mary Hatch is not here. Roy Webb, our chair. Let's see, Bagel Gerhardt. Please holler out, Martha, if I'm forgetting anyone. Then there's me, Latimer Smith. Who am I forgetting? Was there anyone else on the committee? Okay, so yeah, round of applause. I just want to say real quickly, just do a quick plug. Ryan Sabino, who is our committee member, she's been dedicating a ton of time over the last few years, and most recently this summer, she reinstalled the Glen Canyon exhibit, along with help from Martha Ham and Levi Jameson and Bogquist and others that I probably am forgetting to mention, but also Ken and Jane Slight have been integral in that, and it's on display right now. She got it up and running again in May. It's been stored for a few years at Pack Creek Ranch, and it's going to be on display until next June, I believe. So please check that out, even if it's not this trip, another trip. And something someone told me today that really hit home was, remember, this museum is your museum. It's mine, it's yours, it's all of ours, whether you like to vote or don't, or if you're just interested in the history, or if you just love the area from, you know, the top of the drainage all the way up in the Wind River Range and the you know, Grand Lake on the Rockies, all the way through the Grand Canyon and beyond. This is your museum. There's not a museum that does this and with it quite the way that we do and the way it does, and the Hall of Fame is really unique, especially. So please continue to support us. We really need it and really appreciate it. More things before we go, but I'm going to announce the presenters right now. We have three inductees.
Yeah,
So
okay.
Denny Haskew is going to present about Kim Crumbo. Richard Quartaroli, otherwise known as Q, is going to present on Dick McCallum. And then Brad Dimock, otherwise known as Brad, is going to talk without Martin Litton. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the first of those three, which is Kim Crumbo, presented by Denny Haskew.
To get started, I want to first introduce the love of Kim's life, his wife Becky, and he's time. Kim and I are best friends. He was my best, absolutely my best friend for 50 years. There's Kim. We were also Citizen Potawatomi Nation tribal members together. He's my Potawatomi brother, and so our Daniel was that. Our history together. I was introduced to D&C Holiday by a high school friend of mine, Marty Taylor, and Marty started working with Dee before we had a driver's license. And he brought me on board, and we got things rolling. Marty also introduced me to Kim. That's a long story. The first time we took Kim down the river was 1970. Kim was in the Navy. Kim was you probably all know, he's a decorated Navy SEAL on SEAL Team 1, 3 combat tours in Vietnam. And he borrowed a boat from the Navy in San Diego and came out, and we rigged it up with oars, and we got a 10-man raft from D and took him down Westwater. Said all of us, he had a lot of experience paddling in the surf, but he'd never really run a whitewater trip before. But still a little bit. That's he did great. Then I went into the service in 71, and then Kim got out of the service in 72, March of 72. Became, I think, Dee's probably first full-time employee that year. And then I got out of the service March of '73, and Ken came and got me in Colorado, and we drove to Utah and checked with Rural Rose at his ranch, where that's where we used to put in our fresh water. The ice had cleared, his ranch wasn't flooded anymore, so we ran the river with ice on the banks of the fresh water. It was quite exciting, but it's a good introduction to that deal, because we started working for D and Ken Slight next 3 years, just doing all our canyons of the Colorado, the Lower, Panama, Green, and
Upstairs.
we could work back to back, and that's where we came brothers really forever. Kim Crumbo, you say that name to anybody who's been in the Park Service or a experienced river runner, conservationist, even legislator, trail crew people, and you'll get their attention right away. It's that name. And if they knew Kim, if they worked with him and knew his bear hug greetings that he would give you, they would also show their respect and their pride just by the mention of his name. Kim would be very humbled by this honor. If John Wesley promised him into the Hall of Fame, he would say something like he said something really stupid right off. He'd be really, really humbled by it. His experience as a river runner, like I said, started in probably 1972. He worked 4 years as a commercial river guide extraordinaire. People loved to ride on his boat. He's had such a great knowledge of geology and the flowers, he knew all the flowers and plants, he knew all the animals. He just always is a storehouse of knowledge. Kim was really intelligent. He was really well read, and he had a gift of passing his wisdom and his knowledge on to me, in a way that I really understood it. After being a commercial guide in 1976, Kim went to work for the Park Service, National Park Service in the Canyon, the Grand Canyon, and was a river ranger. And he's accredited with giving lots of, introducing lots of changes, not just to the equipment and the boats, but the way the river unit was run and policies, the way the canyon, the Park Service looked at the canyon. He was always really interested in keeping the canyon wild and clean and respected. After those 10 years, he went to work 10 years in the resource unit of the Grand Canyon. Again, he's working alongside geologists, archaeologists, trail crew people, National Park Service administrators, fish and wildlife people on our trips. I was fortunate enough, when he was a river ranger, I was fortunate enough to work a couple of years as a river ranger as well, in 82 and 83. And then when he was in the research unit, we planned these research trips that were fantastic. They were 18, 21-day trips, geared to doing a pyramid development study. We were working on certain trails, or just some of the best trips of my life. Kim was a conservationist his whole life. In 1976, he was the Sierra Club Wilderness Coordinator. Some of the other things he did was he was the Western Conservation Director of the Wild Lands Network. He was on the board of directors of Rewilding Institute. He was on the board of directors of Wilds Arizona. Kim worked tirelessly to set up a corridor to reintroduce or restore the recovery of the Mexican gray wolf. I think the new national monument that they put in around the canyon is really part of that corridor. Some of the recognition Kim got from his work was in 1999. The National Park Service gave him the Director of Wilderness Management Award. 2016, the Wilberforce Foundation gave him the Conservation Leadership Award for his humility, his knowledge, and love of the wild of the wildest. confusion. I don't know this. I know it's here, wrap it up, okay. Kim was a river guide extraordinaire, he truly was. National Park Service employee, river ranger, so many people here love him, you know, you just can't not love him. I was one of his fellow, I had reached out to some people that just gave me quotes, and one of the quotes was, he was one person who truly cared and made things better. Another one was, he was always there for you, and those two are so true. He was a conservationist to the highest degree his whole life. And we're here to see him inducted into the River Runners Hall of Fame, which I think is just fantastic, just fantastic. Thanks again to the museum for that. I have a couple of quotes I'd like to read of Kim's. Smile. This is Kim Crumbo. We're not screwed if we just get our asses in gear. Make this place a better place. Make this world better. And not let the sons of bitches drag us down. That sounds like. Here's another one. This is a favorite. Pick something that's personal. Pick something that means a lot to you. Commit to that. Be that half-hearted radical Abby talks about in this book, and enjoy life. Enjoy company. Enjoy your kids. Enjoy your dog. Enjoy your wild lambs. And get grounded in that. This happy adventure will be over for us in a blink of an eye. But the world is depending on us to allow it to continue. The diversity of life, including human life, there's always good things about humanity that are worth fighting for. There's still some good in this world worth fighting for. So I'd like to thank the audience for listening to that. Museum, family for having me there, and all right.
Yeah, so we're gonna end the Crumbo presentation. We have a short video we're gonna watch.
Sorry, folks, this is on us. We are blessed to have as much technology as we do, but every once in a while, we are true newbies at this. So let's see if I can fix it. If not, we'll. All right, I rely on Elaine. She is the glue that makes this all we get when I'm here.
There we go.
That was it.
I didn't stop it. It's buffering. It's got too many things going at once.
I think you need to give up on this. I'm sorry, folks. This is on YouTube. When you get on YouTube, put search Kim Crumbo and you'll be able to see this video. It is an amazing, beautiful testimony. It is my son Zach. And it's worth checking out when you get home tonight. Yeah, we knew there would be technical glitches, and we just didn't know how many. Hopefully this is the only one, but. All right, I'll turn it back over to Matt. Oh, hang on.
There's a chance you can just download it right now and then you can play the way.
You know, Lane will work and do the magic she did behind the scenes, and if we can, we will. If not, then I'm sorry.
One more time, I bet we can get it.
Take this place.
All right, so the problem right now is I have too many things going on my computer right now. It's not liking to download it.
Take this place. Take this place. Down. Any kind of that or aberration, not to mention something regarding the city matter. But I had the opportunity, I got a really job, you know. And just kind of wound it down, and college got very active, worked in the park, you know, really what I did, because I now have a retirement.
I was gonna say, when I would pause it, and let it catch up.
Go to the next slide.
All right, next up, we're gonna do Dick McCallum by Richard Quartaroli.
Please bear with me. I've been struggling this week with the throat problem. So I got a little laryngitis, may have to clear my throat, drink some water. Consequently, I'm gonna be reading. I hope I don't bore you to tears. Very slowly. Okay, so I guess we'll read that story. It was my good fortune that I had the privilege of doing at least one Grand Canyon river trip with each inductee. This is. It's already jumped. Can you go back for me?
There's the arrow.
They're gonna be slow all the time. It's my good fortune that I had the privilege of doing at least one Grand Canyon river trip with each inductee. Dick in 1973, Kim in 1980, and Martin in 1994 and 2007. I hold each of them in high esteem. Of course, my talk here will be not only one that Dick McCallum, summarizing his life and connection to river running, and providing some of my reminiscences about Mac, as he was often called. Youth advances by.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to wait on this.
Yep.
Born December 29th, 1939 in Southern California, Mac grew up in the North Hollywood area. He got his early water experience by spending high school summers at Lake Arrowhead, working on boat docks, running boat motors and diving for engines. Mac related, just by chance, I was watching television one night, spotted this travel adventure film featuring Georgie White. I hadn't decided what I really wanted to do, but this looked just as exciting as racing cars, which I like to do, build up cars. So I set up to track her down. I didn't find her living in Vernal, Utah, but I found her in LA, in Inglewood. She'd have these river rat parties. They'd rent the Mayflower Ballroom, and there'd be hundreds and hundreds of people. And she'd show all these 16mm movies. In 1957, that summer, I went on my first Grand Canyon river trip as a paying passenger. Mac chose Georgie over other adventure type trips because of the fun and hijinks at Georgie's river raft party. And Whitmore watched Ed Gooch, one of Georgie's boatmen on the triple rig, hiked out of the canyon. Dick thought that Gooch is committed to a couple of weeks in the military reserves. Gooch later co-founded the Grand Canyon River Company with George Webb that became Oars. Georgie had noticed Mac as a great replacement, and at that point he became a Grand Canyon boatman, joining Chet Bundy on the triple rig. Mac recalled, in general, I would meet Georgie up in Moab and May. Usually we do Cataract, Glen, Grand Canyon, and then depending on the business and the water level, we go up and do another Glen Canyon, or possibly 2 Grand Canyons. Then it typified going to Idaho, doing the Middle Fork, the Big Salmon, Hell's Canyon, or doing an exploratory. She did quite a bit in Mexico. I went down there with her in the early 60s in Alaska. Matt continued, if you worked for Georgie, you didn't get paid during the summer at all, but she'd cover you for everything. At the end, you'd have breakfast together and she'd put down a stack of bills and say, thanks, this is what I've got for you this year. There was one time we went to Alaska, did an exploratory on the Copper River. We sat down to have breakfast at the airport because we were all flying back then. And she said, well, Dick, we had a pretty good summer, but this is really expensive to come up here and I don't have any money to pay you. And I don't have any money to get you back either. I spent a little extra time in Anchorage that year figuring out how to get back. She was upfront with me, but that's how things went. It was a little hard as a 19 or 20-year-old, kind of understand that, but that was Georgia. In the early 1960s, Georgia passengers Ron and Sheila Smith met Mac on a Georgia River trip, and Ron also became the main boatman. They built rowing deck canoes to run the Green and Colorado rivers from the Green's headwaters at Green River Lakes to document the undammed river stretches. In their words, our aim is to give what one might call a last look at this area of isolated beauty, because many of the canyons of the Colorado will be completely covered within the year by the backup water of the Glen Canyon and Flaming Gorge dams. Bowman Lou Steiger wrote, it's hard to fathom knowing Glen Canyon intimately and watching it go. A time in Grand Canyon, Mac talks about these things, when there were no tamarisks and the beaches were huge when the water was low. High water was 127,000 CFS, not 30,000. The trip ended partway through Grand Canyon as Mac had to get back to school. Discussion on that trip resulted them in co-founding Grand Canyon Expeditions. This is a 1965 flyer from the company, 12 days, lease ferry to Temple Bar for $350. In 1966, Mac conducted his first outward-bound type youth trip with GCE in Grand Canyon. Going into teaching and counseling careers, Mac felt that experiential education with youth was more than a worthy goal for both him and them. In 1960, Mac parted. In 1970, Mac partnered with Ron and GCE, and he and his wife, Susie, founded Grand Canyon Youth Expeditions to do just that. Originally designed for young men, 16 to 23 years old, and more than just for the fun and excitement of a downriver ride. By 1973, at least, some women were also included. In a 1972 National Geographic School Bulletin article, Mac wrote, at Journey's End, my young companions always clamber ashore, a stronger and wiser bunch than when they first met the water. It's the stronger and wiser part that especially interests me. The trip teaches how people work together and gain a love for the workings of nature. A Flagstaff newspaper article stated, McCallum has developed a step-by-step program designed to help each young man discover and build upon his resources, and that the company offered scholarships to deserving young people who otherwise wouldn't have the experience of floating down the Colorado River. Mac designed a galley style rowing boat, using two military surplus bridge pontoon snouts and the frame between. This allowed participation from 4 rowers and a boatman at the stern with the steering wheel. Participants took turns guiding the rigs and also coordinated with all camp chores. That rig might have become the basis for a 1-rower snout rig that some Grand Canyon outfitters adapted. Hearn Hoops wrote that Crazy Al Wilson designed some rowing snouts for ARTA as a result. Mac also adapted it for a motor rig with double snouts. Mac related about the youth emphasis. Why be a school teacher? You'd like to get something to kids. You'd like to get something to somebody else. That had a lot of romance to it. That's what made some people click. I wanted to bring kids back and have them feel what I had felt, which had a tremendous impact on my life. And I wanted them to be involved. I wanted them to start feeling really good about themselves and participating. So GCYE, we built these stand-and more rigs. This was the only way I could figure out how to get everybody involved, because they trade off and have this really action-oriented trip and feel like they were a part of the trip. That June 1970 trip had Flagstaff locals manning the oars in this classic Ted Whitmore photo of them in Hermit Rapid. And in the audience, Dan Durker, I suppose, who's on the bow on the starboard side. Unfortunately, in the late 60s, Mac's house in Fort Valley, Flagstaff, caught fire, and he lost all his river collection from Georgia and GCE. All the images are from the McCallum family, unless otherwise noted. In 1971, I visited the Grand Canyon for the first time. Parked at Mather Point, did a short walk to the viewpoint. My first sighting totally overwhelmed me, and I was speechless. For whatever reason, I immediately decided that the next time I was at the Grand Canyon would be from the bottom. Though I had skied and backpacked, I had not yet run any whitewater, but that decision did not seem confusing. The next year, I rafted smaller California rivers and read an article about Grand Canyon boating in a sports magazine. Contacted the Park Service for the list of the Grand Canyon National Park River outfitters. After receiving all 22 brochures, I compiled a chart of all the company's criteria. But I quickly realized my choices between the 2 that offered the longest trips of 18 days for my one and only trip of a lifetime. Grand Canyon Youth Expeditions or Grand Canyon Dories. Youth Expedition 1, as it offered a participatory experience geared toward a younger demographic, wherein their youth rode, cooked, cleaned, and did rover duty. Hardly a youth at 25, in July 1973, I met Dick and Susie McCallum at Flagstaff, owners and operators with Mac as trip leader and head boatman. Often Susie would accompany the river trips, but as she was pregnant with daughter Jamie, she opted out of this one. And in the front row, we have daughter Jamie, her husband Bill. In a BQR farewell, boatman Jeff Corley wrote, Mac's love and devotion to his family and animals were unparalleled. He would always talk with them first in any conversation. Here are Mac with Susie and Jamie at the oars. It's Jamie's first Grand Canyon River trip at 6, and she wrote, hike that and Kaibab Trail, brave parents. And Jamie was always willing to help. As so many who have done a Grand Canyon River trip can attest, it is one of the most important experiences ever, and mine was no different, even life-changing as it turned out. I still have a good friend that met on that trip 50 years ago. In all my years and about 180 trips, I never kept a journal. I took some brief notes in my Belknap guide, but loaned it to some friends who didn't get it back. Didn't take many photos and haven't found them in years, so I have to rely on some memories. It was July 73, but no rain in 18 days, and not sure we had much cloud cover. I lost my only sunglasses and hat. Was pretty much in cutoffs with Chuck Taylor's, maybe a t-shirt. I threw the cutoffs away at the end of the trip. Back then, it didn't matter much, and I'm paying for it now. We camped at the ledges, what we call the oven shelves. preheat all day and bake all night. The other boatman was Jim David, also a teacher at Flagstaff Junior High School, as was Susie. Here are their yearbook pictures from the mid-70s. Evidently, beards were out, but Tom Selleck mustaches were in. 5 years before he and the stash were in Magnum PI. Floated down to above Elks Chasm to do a morning hike to the Royal Arch and Spire. Plan was to go up, come back, have lunch, and down to Elks for the afternoon. Mac and Jim had not been to the Arch and had read famed hiker Harvey Butcher's description, leading to an underestimate of travel time. Hiked through the Arch about 50 yards to above a high fall, which we did not attempt. We got back late afternoon and camped at that spot. From then on, when we did a long hike, we asked if those were real miles or Butcher miles. I had never repeated that hike, but there is a very visible, well-worn trail there now. Downstream at Elks Chasm, we went up as many layers as we could through Royal Arch Creek until we assumed we were at the bottom of that high fall. A hike I will always remember. At Dubendorf Rapid, we stopped to scout. As the water was low, the day was spent hiking way up above at Stone Creek. Also a first for Mac and Jim. Back to the river, the water was still low, so we camped, hoping for more water in the morning. There wasn't, so we ran it anyway. Another long hike, which were GCYA specialties, to Peach Creek, Thunder River, Surprise Valley, Deer Creek. No clouds or shade. In the middle of July, Mac and Jim headed from Tapeats to Deer by sitting at the rear set of oars. The only other rapid I remember clearly was Lava Falls. For that one, Mac and Jim replaced the rear set of rowers, not using a sweep oar. They faced forward at that set. As the Park Service was there, Mac was hoping to have a classic run, but we got off course and touched the black rock at the bottom, though it didn't seem like any potential flip. Owen Gorley stated, Mac never ended up flipping a raft in his 40 years down there in Grand Canyon. On a trip near the end of his career, he came really close to earning a new moniker at Sapphire Rapid, Captain Capsize. The whole trip, watching his tube stand, held their breath, only to realize the bottom was still down. Mac carried over some of Georgie's practices, but not the blackberry brandy on the youth trips. Equipment was minimal for everyone in those days. As Georgie did, we used an inflatable wading pool for a lunch table. Boatman Dan Durker related about the little rubber inflatable ducky ponds for tables, and then went on to the food. McCallum was from the Georgie school. He believed in all freeze-dried food, Bridgeport, and he had this one that he loved. He always packed a couple of the chili mats. I think that was his signature meal. He would send 2 fresh onions on the trip. That was the fresh food. That was the exciting diet. On our trip backpacking through Wisconsin and canned meats, including, of course, Spam, all supplemented by lots of ketchup and Tabasco. Which brings me to Mac as a prankster, which belies his solid reputation. In 1973, there was a guy from New Jersey who didn't like spicy foods. Mac had mentioned to him to be careful with the ketchup. It was the hot variety. So the guy claimed it was too hot for him. Expeditions Bowman Gorley related, for all his poker face reputation, Dick was pretty adept at pulling capers. Whether waking up from a lunchtime nap with an M&M melting in your ear, or finding your oar handles covered in peanut butter while pulling away from shore to run a big run. Mac was the ultimate prankster, having learned from Georgie herself in a river rat class. Gorley also related this encounter. Mac was guiding our people up the boulders at Ells. Claire Quist was shuffling his folks down. Some 40 years had passed since they both had started working down there. But Claire had started before Mac. He couldn't let Mac slide. Claire sized him up and said for all to hear, "Oh, there's the new guy." Little did I know that 2 years later, in 1975, I would have another opportunity as a swamper on a motor trip. Arriving at Lee's Ferry to Rig, who did I meet standing on the ramp? Dick McCallum. I introduced myself by saying something like, "I'm sure you don't remember me, but I was on your trip July 73, and now lucky enough to be doing another river trip." And then probably about how great his trip was, and I'll never forget it. Of course, Max said he remembered me, making me think I made an impression. I was a swamper for a couple of vacation trips every year after that, and it seemed I ran into Mac either at the ferry or on the river every time. Doing a lot more trips as a boatman, I didn't see Mac every trip, but would every season, and often enough that I like to think we became friends. Over the years, I ran for a handful of other outfitters, unfortunately never for GCYE or later expeditions, but always enjoyed interacting with the crew on and off the river, sharing their stories in a cold one or two. Moving to Flagstaff, I had more interaction with Mac, especially if I got involved with Grand Canyon River Guides and with my work as a librarian, Glen Canyon Environmental Studies at NAU Klein Library Special Collections and Archives, and conducting oral histories. Mac and I had many discussions concerning archives and river running history, especially his involvement with the government on many levels. When he and Susie lost their concessions permit during the 1995 prospectus and their long fight to regain it, which they finally did. It was such an emotional aspect for him that he often could not continue to talk about it. We hope to do a follow-up oral history interview to incorporate that, as his original one was while he was still an outfitter. Over the years, he became more conversant about it, and I may have heard almost the complete story, as each time he conveyed more detail and also more emotions. Unfortunately, we now won't know, though through his archives that he wishes to go to NAU, some researcher might be able to piece together the story. Mac told me many times that, like Georgie, he was a survivor. That's why he thought they got along. And he survived those government interactions. His childhood experiences led him to teaching and counseling, with advanced degrees in both from Northern Arizona University in the mid-60s, and then into participatory education, GCYE, and the innovative New Start program within the Flagstaff School District. Mac proposed it in 1977 as an outdoor education program for excelling students, potential dropouts, and economically disadvantaged students in grades 10 through 12, which would include river rafting, hiking, and ski touring. It would not be just a fun type program, but a structural one, educational and character building. The key to the program is the fact that grouping different students together helps them benefit from different social and intellectual ideas. For the gifted student and the economically disadvantaged student, the program will be an experiential type. For the dropout, the program will be an elective to help keep potential dropouts in school. Bowling Great Reef, Norman Doris Neville's grandson, was associated with New Start and said that even after Mac was no longer directly involved, he attended classes and entered into discussions with the students. Interesting that at the end of my boating career, I found experiential participatory education with the NAU and Prescott College Grand Canyon semester and Grand Canyon Youth the most fun and rewarding. He repeated the surviving and moving on many times, and it became a major defining portion of his life. He often could be found at the Kickstand Cafe coffee shop in Flagstaff, talking to the nearby junior and senior high school students about river and life's possibilities and experiences. I think he derived energy by interacting and sharing with them. I'm part of a loose group of geezers who meet occasionally for beverages and blather. And Mac was able to join us a couple of times before he died in 2020. Inviting us to his rock house and boat shop, touring his memorabilia. We're very thankful this happened. Timing isn't everything, and it certainly helps. One of the geezers, geologist and boatman Wayne Randy, related, Mac quickly understood how the river experience could alter and change the course of people's lives, especially young people. Feeling an abusive home environment, a topic he readily shared with anyone. He found the river to be a challenging but growth-inducing place, accepting of anyone who might be open to its many charms. Knowing how the river trip in Grand Canyon changed the trajectory of his life, Mac wanted nothing more than to offer that same opportunity to other people just starting out in life. And that was the birth of Grand Canyon Youth Expeditions. Known for his independent nature and freewheeling style, here's an example from the 1983 high water year. Dan Durker recalled, this ranger comes down and said, the river's closed. I'll be back in 15 minutes. You guys can't go. And McCallum just goes to the phone and calls Superintendent Dick Marks. And I was impressed with McCallum. Looking back on it, it was a great moment for him. Max says, well, you can't stop me from going. Mark says, sure I can. You won't be insured. Max says, you have it all wrong, pal. You're a rider on my policy. We're leaving. Hey, I was down here before the dam. This river's fine. You just got to go in the right place. So off we go on our little high water adventure, and it was great, but it was screaming. Dick and Susie continued GCYE until 1984, when their main focus shifted towards a more general clientele, and they changed the name to Expeditions Incorporated. There was some contention with bureaucracy regarding rules, regulations, and permitting, making it very difficult for the small family-owned operation to continue. And the company sold in the late 90s. But that continued his lifelong interest in river running, experiential education, and teaching and counseling youth. In the 1990s, he participated in Jumping Mouse Camp, City of Phoenix's river trips for other abled folks. He was Santa Claus for many years on Toys for Tot trips into Supai Village with the Supai kids. He learned to ride horses with Susie, including the Western States Trail Ride, earning a Tevis buckle for the 100-mile endurance ride. And he was proud to have restored and updated American Austin Hot Rod. Mac held to the GCYE Expeditions model of a trail to discovery. From 1957, for over 6 years, Mac was an integral part of Grand Canyon river running, perhaps including some sneak trips, and maybe a flaming watermelon or two. Bowman Jeff Morley wrote, he never stopped reaching out to youth in his own sage and kind manner. On his gravestone, the McCallum family added, life well lived in Grand Canyon, in supporter of all journeys. Thank you. Katie and Bill, replica. Yeah. I don't know. Nobody was going to take a picture. Oh, wave.
Thanks.
Words change.
Oh,
You have to be in front of the
I know. I thought it seemed like Janet was going to say something. I was going to wait.
Hey, yeah, thank you, Q. And Danny, I didn't thank you. Thank you for your talk. I just have, is Lou Steiger here? Yeah. Yeah, why don't you come on up, Lou? It's great. Yeah. He has a few words that Brian Durker, who could not be here, wanted to say and relate about Dick McCallum. And Brian is in that photo in the first GCY trip. Yeah, go ahead. Come on up to the mic. I know it's different when you talk. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I got sent up here by Brian. He wanted me to speak for him. I wish I could do a good Brian Durker. But he felt like he was really, Dick was really working him and Brian thought he ought to say something about it. So texted me this last night. It was a little late. I kept asking him, okay, Brian, he's supposed to be launching on a river trip today, which is why he knew he couldn't come. But this thing that he said here was, Dick McCallum profoundly changed my life. I was his first employee in Grand Canyon. He put Don Neff in my life, and he put all of you guys in my life. I congratulate everybody here for adopting Dick into the sacred hall. You're the runners all the day. Good job, everybody.
I'm glad you brought up Don F. Is Don in the building right now? I just want to say real quick, I neglected to mention Don when I was talking about committee members. I did mean to mention him as well. He helped us out in the last few months leading up to the event. So count him in as a committee member as well. And we really appreciate Don wherever he is. If he's upstairs or in the room right now. Thanks, Don. Two other special things before Brad comes up really briefly. Janet may have covered some of these, but I just want to say them one more time if she didn't. Loie Evans for doing the food, you know, the opening. Tim Gaylord specifically from Holiday River Expedition, just for being that everything guy, whenever he needed something, you have him. Special thanks as well, not only for being presenters, but Brad Dimock, Richard Quartaroli, and Roy Webb for just doing the text and gathering the photos that went on the panels that we have here that will eventually hang in the museum. Thank you, you three. Really appreciate it. Michael Smith, who was formerly a committee member. We needed him this year to help gather up all the silent auction items. He did it from a list that was put together by Herb Hoops, who was also a committee member for a long time. And he got that done and got all the auction items together, so the rest of the committee didn't have to. And I don't think he's here tonight, but he didn't make it last year either. But a big round of applause for Michael Smith. All these weeks from now, Seba, who donated the McCallum, the trailer that the frame was on and the frame that donated to the museum, also allowed us to work on it and get it ready for the river. And that's where Scott Davis and Seba and the crew there, but also Bago Gerhardt, who just jumped on it with Levi Jameson and said, I'll go down. And so Bago went down to Flagstaff, got it, brought it up to Moab and restored it, and just helped in so many countless ways. So special thanks to Bago. Thank you for the applause and for listening. Coming up next, we have Brad Dimock, and he's going to present on Martin Litton. Thank you, Brad.
Amazing to be here with folks. There are so many people here that we work with Martin from the late '60s. I mean, Ty Childress this year was with Martin really early, and all the '70s crew seems to be here, and the '80s crew. Amazing, what a wonderful family. Also here on Zoom is Esther Litton. 104 years old. Youngest son and his dad. We have to tie Esther down because but it's not. I'm gonna try and talk about Martin Litton in 20 minutes, which is absolutely impossible. Larger than life character who lived to be nearly 100 years old and never slowed down. One of Martin's great quotes, even at first sight, if you take a good long look at the Grand Canyon, claim more of your life. At 18 years old in high school, he wrote this to the LA Times. The people in the entire state should rise up against the destruction of Mono Lake. Mono Lake is a gem among scenic attractions. He's starting the Mono Lake fight like 30 years before it became public. Way ahead of his time. He wrote Stroke at Stanford, that's him on the front door there, and worked with a group of people there in a conservation organization to fight roads going through the high Sierras, and those roads are still not there. So early successes. And he went off to war, and he wanted to be a pilot, but his eyesight, colorblindness, wouldn't allow that, but he somehow finagled his way into the glider program. And if you can imagine anything more insane than these things, they were these huge boxes with wings, and they would tow them out over the English Channel and cut them loose a lot of times at night, and they'd have to land them full of troops in some field behind enemy lines, and then find your way home, either by sneaking across enemy lines, or sometimes they would snatch it. And Mark described that to me once, where he's sitting in this huge box, and you've got a huge cable out on two poles in the field, and here comes a bomber with a hook, and that hook grabs that loop and starts punching out cable. He said the cable would jump back and forth across the field, bushes flying, and all of a sudden, and just hope it would fly. He did that. He came home and married the lovely Esther Clouette, and I don't know her dress, and had a little honeymoon. And he went to work at the LA Times as a circulation manager, and he drove around in the desert and all over Southern California and the mountains, trying to make sure everybody's carrying the Times. But he would take his trusty Kodak with him, and he'd write stories. And he wasn't on the writing staff, and he would just sneak these letters on the editor's desk when they went there, and they run. It's one that it's out in Monument Valley, where never met. And then he started writing. He assigned himself the task of climbing down into Mount Falls with this fellow Lefty Bryant, and met up with the Mexican Hat Expeditions trip. And they were portaging lava and running a crisscross through. They took him.
Going to picture something.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I said you got this.
Esther.
Is Esther.
Hi, Esther. And went back out at Whitmore and wrote a story for the Times and stuck it on somebody's desk. And you can read that Reclamation Bureau plan, Perilous Scenic Wonderland. This is in the early 50s, about 10 years before that fight began. He's already starting proactive resistance against damning Grand Canyon. And it was articles like these that got the attention of Dave Brower, who was the new executive director of Sierra Club. He went, I don't know who this guy is, but I want him on the board. I need help. Because there were a lot of conservatives on the board, and Brower wanted to fight. And so he drafts Martin on the board of the Sierra Club. And Martin says, well, at first I said, well, why would I want to go on a group with a bunch of knitters? Sit in the woods, walk around. Brower said, that's changing. I'm in charge here. I need you. And so off they went. And we're kind of partners in a lot of big fights. The biggest early one was Dinosaur National Monument. And there were Bureau plans to put dams at Echo Park and maybe one at Slip Mountain as well. So Martin goes up there, there's Esther and two of the kids, beautiful photo. And started writing articles about this fight and helped produce this early Sierra Club book, this dinosaur, which was given to all the congressmen, senators. And he said, you know, people write letters to their congressmen and they ignore them, but what if they have kids to write? Maybe they wouldn't ignore their kids. So he wrote some stories for kids magazines, and they all got to write letters. And Bruce Keller told me a story of being on the Yampa with Martin, and he described that, and this woman started crying. And he said, well, whatever's the matter? And she said, I wrote one of those letters. And there they are on the shore of the wild. Pretty beautiful. There it is. Yampa coming into the green, not underwater. Well, they won that fight, kind of. Pulled those two dams off of the Colorado River Storage Project, but they allowed the Glen Canyon Dam to go through. And when they realized what they'd lost, it really crushed him. Brower would cry about it until the day died. Shouldn't have called. Martin went to work for Sunset Magazine as their travel editor, and they didn't want to be a controversial magazine. They needed the support of the state and the industries. And Martin would just write these things and go, we're putting new roads up through redwoods, and I just showed before and after, and not really saying outraged about it. But he sent me this one day. He says, "We're 1,000 words, sneaky, you know." And fought like hell for the redwoods, and he was Wallace Stegner said that Martin Litton knew the West better than any human, inch by inch from ground and air. Because he had access to the Sunset airplane, he had his own airplane. And he would figure out where all the clear cuts were that couldn't see from the road because he just fly over them. And so he was a very effective warrior in fighting for Redwood National Park. And that's there now. You can go there, see those trees. Meanwhile, over on Colorado, there's this character named P.T. Riley who's pointing at us. And that's Norman Nevelson that had. And Riley rode for Nevels for a little while and got off on his own, started building his own roads, doing private trips. Well, there were gatherings in California where they would come off the river trip and show pictures. And Martin had met the boatman on that earlier hike into Grand Canyon. So he met Riley at one of those gatherings. And Riley said, well, why don't you come row a boat for me? And that's Riley taking the key to Grand Canyon. And so Martin signs up to be one of the boatmen, and then falls off a horse in the Sierras, dislocates the shoulder. So he and Esther went through as passengers on their first trip in 1955, but he came back and rode in 56, one of the first 6 dozen boatmen that ever run a boat in Grand Canyon. And there's the boat, these weird little things that Riley invented. Sort of based loosely on a Nevels boat, but pointy on both ends and much more deck in and flat as a flounder. The waves go right at the top of them. John Blaustein said him somewhere. He got to row this thing in later years. They call it the sub. There's Martin gotten right in upset in 56. And scouting rapids. And that looks so much like you detail. Oh my God. Well, Riley went on to do 3 high water trips in a row after that Martin wasn't on, and his boats failed. They sunk. One time they got to a lot of falls, kicked them off, and went down the Lake Mead to find them. And that's what this shot is. They finally just caught them at Pine Creek. Storm out. Always wanted to do that. They would give geology take punch it full of holes and they throw it. Well, Martin was working with Sierra or Sunset Magazine, And he did a story on the Mackenzie River boat parade, which is these wonderful Oregon trip boats, little open fishing boats that have been evolving up there for several decades. And as the threats of upcoming dam issues were started to build in Grand Canyon, Martin called up Riley and he said, we've got to take some politicians and writers and photographers down Grand Canyon, we've got to do a trip. Riley goes, can't, it's on all those. And so Martin started working with Prince Alfred up in Oregon, very well-known designer and builder and guide, and a boat builder named Keith Steele, and talked P.T. Riley into going in on getting 2 of these Mackenzie boat hulls. And that's what the classic Mackenzie looks like. But there's one correspondence in Martin's files that I've been going through where he's working with people up there and finding that you might want to tweak it for big water. So they stretched it out a little, put a flat piece in the middle, and created these 2 hulls. And little top there in the foreground, that's DL, and his sister and brothers up there rowing it. And this is Martin's hull sitting inside of Riley's hull. So they're probably just delivering this to Martin's house, and it's going to take that other hull down to Riley. And Riley wrote Martin this fiery letter. He said, these boats will not work. This is a horrible idea. I don't think we could get it through even without the end of the Martin goes, well, I may be cocky, but I think we should try it. And off they went in these 2 boats. And this is at top of Lake Mead. There's Martin. It worked. Riley wrote a letter to Keith Steele and said, these are by far the best boats ever done in Colorado, and just raved about it. So that's the introduction of the Oregon drift boat to big water in the Southwest. There's Martin. Well, they did another trip 2 years later, brought down Francois Ledet and Philip Hyde, photographer, and brought those 2 boats again. And that one in the middle is the Lucky Pierre. It's an open Mackenzie, first open boat to come through Grand Canyon. Open Mackenzie boat. There's Rodney Martin and old Phil Hyde. It's Lisa Kearsley's dad, for those of you who know her. Old people portaging. That boat was later decked over by a family friend, Clyde Childress. His son Ty is here somewhere. Probably the earliest river affiliate of Martin major here today. And they ran the trip and they made a book, Time the River Flowing, credited with motivating gajillion letters to Congress and affecting a lot of congressmen. And that was important because of these guys. That's Barry Goldwater there on the left, and Governor Paul Fannin, Mo Udall in the background, Senior Senator Carl Hayden in the front, and Stuart Udall, right? And this team decided they were going to get the canal system, the Arizona Central Project, pushed through. And they're all about to go out of office. Johnson's probably not going to run again. Carl Hayden was retiring, so we got to do it. They started pushing for these 2 dams to fund canal system. And it was a bad thing here. There's one going to be in Marble Canyon, one down at Bridge Canyon, and both of them are outside the national park at that time. So they thought, well, we can't, that won't rile up those pesky Sierra Clubbers because it's not a national park. And, but here they are, you know, that's Grand Canyon. And the Bureau said, well, it'll give the common man a chance to go see Grand Canyon and then the motorboat. Well, at the annual meeting of the Sierra Club, Mount Litton erupted. He just brought some charts and pictures. He said, do you have any idea what you're doing by not fighting stands? This is Grand Canyon, the Grand Canyon. I wish that had been taped because everybody said it was stunning. He's a great orator. He could just stand up and give a speech at the moment. I asked Dave Brower, I said, did you prime him for that speech? He goes, yeah, he primed him. He'd sway the entire board to vote unanimously to fight the state project. And off they went to war. There's Brower at the rim, say Grand Canyon. They ran national ads across the country. Should we also flood the Sistine Chapel so tourists can get near the sea? They won. Stuart Udall finally went down the river to see what all the ruckus was about and got off and said, we can't do that. Incredible. Well, one of the next big fights was against nuclear reactors at the Powell Dunes, and they got that washed. And then Martin was traveling overseas when the Sierra Club approved the next reactor proposal at Diablo Canyon. And Martin came home and erupted again. He said, "Are you crazy? We got to reverse that decision." And very contentious for the Sierra Club, and Brower did about face on it, but they lost that fight. And Martin spoke with Quartaroli, he renamed Dimock. And that began a long series of naming all the boats after environmental issues that were man-made fiasco. Martin rowing in the early days of his racing life jacket. That's the Susie 2, I believe. Later renamed he's a it's a little he loved to keep those boats looking good. He's very prideful about it. If yet we're full of water and another trip came by, go, don't bail, don't let us you bail. What happy. Yeah. I want to thank Rudy Petchak and John Lowski for most of these images. They're just wonderful. They'll never stop and fight. There's always something we have to fight. It's a 3-trip convergence at Oak Beach at Fan, 3 Petchak shop. It's got 18 doors, all in the company college. Martin and Georgie. Martin was a great fiberglass. We don't need no stinking gloves. His elbows in resin. He wasn't on a lot of the trips in later years. We did those, but he would show up about 10 feet off the deck. Just hear this noise. You look up and there's this big Cheshire grin on his face and some pale, terrified passenger riding out. Just had to check on him. I love that shirt. That's what he would say. Begins what? He did several trips in later years, and they were more with, for some reason, here's a documentary trip in baseball, it was fun, with P.T. Riley, came back for a trip. There he's doing one with Brower, and he kept running on into his 80s. This is Martin Litton running long balls at 85 years old. Not a drop in the book. And at 90 years old on the river. And Donald rode with him the first half, and then his brother Johnny rode the second half. And Martin just had a kidney out, I think, and didn't row too many of the rapids, but I think he rode a few at 90. His main passion in those later years was the voyage, which were allegedly protected, but they were still being cut, and he was fiery and fighting for those things. Joined Washington, and making organizations. David Sequoia's making speeches. Look out, here he comes.
That one.
One of the battles that got fought on the way was with the Grim Reaper, would try to kill him, and he just wouldn't die. He just kept it. He had stuff to do. And made it to almost 98 before he slipped away. But I think it's really appropriate. He's here in the Hall of Fame. 80 years of fighting, from the time he was 18 till his 98. Fighting and often winning these battles. Exporting these wonderful little boats that have become quite common in the Southwest and the Northwest now. It just delights me. And yes, how many people in here work with one? Look at that. This is a family. 30, 40, 50 years later for a lot of us, and we're still a family. The shot Tromblowski took the morning, it's the morning after that 85-year-old run Bottom Falls, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Darren and John. We've got this picture in our boat shop, and every time we're doing something silly, we look up. Larry. We created something more beautiful by not defining it. Saving it as an act of creation. We kept it unconsecrated. We made the case that the Grand Canyon was worth saving. Grand Canyon is holy. The public side, Grand Canyon should not be. Not with you, I gave you a vote yesterday to burn it up. That's just like a model. They were ready for it.
Well done, Brad. John, Brad. I just got a couple more things I want to say on behalf of the committee, especially. I want to thank the museum staff, specifically Janet. You want to stand in for a sec, Janet, Elaine. Well, as a committee, you know, we meet often, and especially this year, we've met a lot. It took a lot, you know, we're kind of coming back from the COVID times, and we did an event last year, and it was great. It was kind of smaller, and we knew this one was going to be real big. And so as a committee, you know, we have all these ideas, we want to do this and do that, but the staff of the museum is really the ones that put things in play. And so it's like, we know enough to know that they do a ton of stuff. We don't know all the details. But just knowing they're here and doing all those things that have to be done so that this can happen, just, you know, made us feel secure that this was gonna go off and go really well. So just want maybe one more round of applause for you. Yeah, I also just wanna thank the speakers one more time, Denny, Hugh, and Brad. You know, we worked with the family and as a committee and just, you know, asked around and, you know, there's a lot of people who would want to talk about these three and that would do a really good job, but we feel so fortunate that you had the three of you, and that you were willing and that you did such a great job, and we're so supportive. And so thank you again very much. We really appreciate you three. Want to say, you know, we've said a lot of things. If I've missed anyone, I want to hear about it. I know it's easy to talk about some people and forget others, but come tell me off, you know, on my own. You know, we'll do better next time. I mean, because there's so many people who do so many things. But lastly, I just wanted to thank the families who are up here in the front, just for being a part of it and being willing. And I know it's probably not easy in some ways it's probably great, but just the fact that you got behind us and we're up for it and you came out from all the places that you live, we really appreciate you. So thank you very much. Before we finish, I'm just going to turn it over to Janet. She has one or two more things.
I want to thank our speakers because this was not an easy night to present on. We had really three amazing men to celebrate. And this is the first time the museum has done this. So thank you so much for bearing with us. Our three speakers in the audience as well. Thank you for hanging in with us. We've got YouTube live out there somewhere. I pray that you had an amazing experience too. We're going to try and build on this example. And I just want to thank all of you for inspiring us. Step out of our comfort zone, try harder, reach more people. Those three guys were what made it worth it. So being a director means I get to fall in love with each one of them. And it has been a really wonderful journey. Thank you.